Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. I'm your host, the Fellow KGB. You can follow me on Twitter at the Fellow KGB. It is Sunday, August 2nd. It's almost 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm going to be doing my running back rankings in this video, and we're going to be looking at my projection database, and we're just going to kind of go through. I'll probably talk mostly about, extensively the RB1s. We'll look at the RB2s, and then we'll kind of talk about the RB3s, who I think have a chance and some upside to be more than an RB3. So we're going to be looking here in the screen share. And of course, we're going to start on top with Christian McCaffrey. I'm going to kind of just highlight these guys as I go. It's really easy. Christian McCaffrey is the number one pick in the draft. Don't overthink it. Don't try to be cute. Don't do anything stupid. Christian McCaffrey, I've got him projected for 103 receptions this year, 131 targets, under 1,000 yards receiving this year. I really don't know how the offense is going to, be a little bit different with Teddy Bridgewater and the new coordinator and the new coach. He's still going to be productive, but I'm just thinking maybe they're going to try to use a little bit other, pieces to try to move the ball and not rely so much on Christian McCaffrey. They're going to want to make sure he stays healthy. So I'm expecting a slight decrease in touches, but still 275 rushing attempts, almost 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns on the ground, and 5 receiving. That gives him a 21.3% target share, 40% opportunity share. And I kind of just want to we're probably going to be going back and forth between the rankings and what these players did last year. But in the offense with Carolina last year, Christian McCaffrey saw 22.43% of the target share. So I'm basically just down almost 2%. Opportunity share, just about 2%. Like I said, I think they're just going to try to scale him back a little bit. 287 rushing attempts last year, 142 targets. So I just kind of decreased it just a little bit. And then he's still clear and above. Like I even put in some decreases in the percents, and he came down a percent of the target share, about 1.2, basically 1.5% of the opportunity share, and he's still well and above Saquon Barkley, who's my RB2. So we'll get into Saquon Barkley next. I have him as my RB2. I don't know how I feel about it because I really don't know if I trust this offense, but I love Saquon Barkley's talent. If he's not the second overall pick, he should be the third. So I think you could argue if you want Zeke or maybe Kamara if you're into the Saints, but Saquon Barkley is the clear number 2 in my book. I have him at 344 PPR points. The next closest is Kamara at 316. So it goes, McCaffrey's well above by himself, but Barkley does have some separation here from the 3 and 4 spots. So let's take a look at the New York Giants team tab. So I've got Saquon projected for 269 carries. His rookie year, his full season, he had 261. So I'm giving him a little bit more of a workload here, career high carries. I got him at 1,325 yards, almost 5 yards carry, 10 rushing touchdowns, 70 receptions, and 95 targets for 575 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's going to be almost 15.5% target share and about 36.5% opportunity share, and the yard share is pretty high as well. So if we look back at we can't really look at his numbers last year. Surprisingly, the man still accounted for 1,000 rushing yards being in and out of the lineup. So he did really well there. And the opportunity share was still really high. So, there's potential where he could really catch McCaffrey this year if things go that way. But his rookie season, we see pretty much similar numbers here. But he had a 20.75% target share and a 40% opportunity share. So I think, I'm like well below both of those numbers. I think that could be, his ceiling if he gets up to the 20% target share and then the 40% opportunity share. If he gets close to that, he does have RB1 upside, and he could overtake McCaffrey there. But for now, I just kind of juiced up his numbers a little bit in the rushing column here. He saw a massive amount of receptions back in 2018, but the Giants really didn't have anybody besides Beckham and Shepard, and I guess Evan Ingram was kind of half in the year. But they have a little bit more weapons now. They might spread the ball out a little bit. So I like Saquon Barkley. I like the Giants offense. They got some good pieces there to throw the ball to. So he's my number 2. Number 3, Alvin Kamara. And I actually think I'm going to go back and edit this because I kind of want to, if I'm up to draft, I think I'm going to take Ezekiel Elliott at number 3 overall over Alvin Kamara just because he's going to get the carries. He's going to get more opportunity. You see we're going to kind of lump these two together. Kamara and Zeke Elliott, but the opportunity share is vastly different for both teams because they're not going to give Kamara more than 200 carries, whereas Ezekiel Elliott's going to approach 300 carries and probably over 50 receptions. But the yard share is going to be about the same. They're both going to account for the same amount of yards, but the target share is going to be Kamara's favor. And then just the opportunity share is going to be Ezekiel Elliott's favor. So if you play in PPR league, go ahead and take Kamara if you feel inclined to do so at 3. But if you're in a half PPR or standard league, I think that's where I'm going to lean Ezekiel Elliott. So I got Alvin Kamara projected for 192 carries, 975 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, and 84 receptions, 99 targets, 625 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. If we look quick here in the New Orleans Saints, he's easily the clear number 1 runner option. Latavius Murray is still there. Ty Montgomery they added in free agency. But he's got to compete for targets, and he's the number 2 target essentially in this offense, and he's also the number 1 running back. So he's going to get the ball, anywhere from 15 to 20 times a game. So I like that, especially in PPR. So that's kind of where I lean. And last year he was kind of dinged up. If we look at his numbers last year, he did battle a few injuries last year, but he still rushed for 4.7 yards per carry. The thing that hurt Kamara were his touchdowns were down. He only scored 6 touchdowns. And the year before that, he rushed for 14 and caught 4. So that's 18. So that's kind of like when a player scores that many touchdowns, it's really hard to repeat that on a yearly basis. So that's, like an Aaron Jones kind of thing. We'll talk about that in a second. Even Christian McCaffrey's touchdowns might come down from what he was at last year. So be wary of that. But Alvin Kamara, he's going to be, he's got a 16.5% target share. That might be among one of the best here at running backs besides McCaffrey. If I filter by target share, Kamara's coming in at number 4 on that list. Opportunity share, it's probably going to be he's going to be down a little bit in opportunity share, like we were talking about before, because he doesn't get the carries, but he's still 14th best there. But his yard share is still pretty good, so his yard share is going to be 9th best. But he gets that big boost in PPRs. If he gets more than 100 targets, you're looking really good. And I feel like 12 touchdowns is like I have him for 8 rushing and 4 receiving. That might be kind of low. So I feel pretty good about Kamara being a top 5 back this year, as long as he stays healthy and on the field. Then you got Ezekiel Elliott here. I really don't need to sell you on Ezekiel Elliott. They don't really use another back besides Tony Pollard. I think if we look last year, they only used 2 running backs all year. So we don't really have to worry. Yeah, only Elliott and Pollard touched the ball. And last year, 301 rushing attempts, 1,357 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, 54 receptions, 420 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. So 14 total. I have him up here at 12 total this year, just under 1,300 yards, and 415 receiving yards. So I kind of have him doing exactly what he did last year, just notch a touchdown down or 2, give him a little bit boost in the receiving average, and I think he's going to be a little bit more. It's interesting because you got Mike McCarthy there. McCarthy's been he never really threw the ball in Green Bay to the running back. So we'll see if that number comes down a little bit. For now, I just ticked it a little bit down. But either way, he's getting a massive opportunity share here of 34.31%. And the Cowboys offense is going to hum. And when they get near the red zone, we're going to see Ezekiel Elliott score touchdowns. So if we look quick here at opportunity share, he's 5th. So everything about Elliott, good offense, good player, just checks all the boxes. So Ezekiel Elliott's my RB4. And then here's Dalvin Cook at RB5, 284.5 projected points. And then I guess I have Alvin, I guess this would be the tier of, you have Saquon and McCaffrey, I guess McCaffrey and then Saquon easily at the top. But you could either take Kamara, Elliott, Cook, or Henry at 3. I could argue that any one could be the better pick than the other one. So I got, Kamara 3, Elliott 4, Dalvin Cook at 5, and Derrick Henry at 6. With Dalvin Cook, I think I have him subtracted a game and a half right now. And that's just because, he hasn't been able to stay healthy for a full season in his whole career. So I kind of knocked him a little bit there. So I think on a points per game basis, he might be, up there with Saquon Barkley. So I could argue that if Cook gets his contract signed, he could be my number 3 running back. He's got a lot of projection points to go up, but if I add a game and a half in there, he's going to be right at probably where Alvin Kamara is. So I love Dalvin Cook. He's used in the passing game. He's going to score touchdowns. Great runner. Everything. I can't really say anything bad about Dalvin Cook. So, and then with that offense, they lost Stephon Diggs. There might even be a heavier focus on the running game this year. So Dalvin Cook checks all the boxes. He's kind of like an Ezekiel Elliott type player right now, where he's a great runner and he's a great receiver, and it's just a matter of how many receptions can they get. That's what's going to separate these guys in PPR leagues. And then you got Derrick Henry at RB6. I have him leading the league in rushing attempts this year. I have him second in rushing yards behind Nick Chubb, but I still have Derrick Henry at 4.8 yards per carry. I have him leading the league in touchdowns, rushing touchdowns this year with 14. And then again, he's not going to help us much in PPR league, so I get it. If you're up at like 5 and you have between Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry, I'm probably just going to lean with Dalvin Cook because of the reception upside. I know there's a little bit of injury risk, but he's just got the receptions going for him. So I got Derrick Henry at 22 receptions, 28 targets, 225 yards, and a touchdown. So that's there. But the thing about Derrick Henry is because he's going to lead the league in rushing attempts, that almost offsets his reception totals because opportunity share, if you filter here, I mean, Derrick Henry's up at number 2. He's going to get the ball a ton. So if you're a volume kind of person, that's how you draft. That's the way to go. But if you like yard share, that's where PPR is going to come into play. So Derrick Henry, he's still my 3rd best running back, but those receiving backs that get more receiving yards are going to be boosted up a little bit there. So that's my top 6. And then really, I mean, those first 6 running backs could all be the first 6 picks of your draft. Maybe Michael Thomas gets sprinkled in there, but those guys are pretty much, I don't see Derrick Henry go past 8 usually. Sometimes someone will sneak another running back or Devontae Adams or something in there. So those guys are all clear. I mean, if you get Derrick Henry or Dalvin Cook at 8, you're feeling pretty good about that. So, but it's after these 6 backs, that's where a lot of rankings and ADP start to differ. So I have Nick Chubb as my 7th back. I'm not worried about Kareem Hunt coming in here and messing up the feng shui, but I do have Nick Chubb going for 295 carries. I have him leading the league in rushing with 1,525, 5.2 yards per carry, 12 rushing touchdowns, and then I have him catching maybe almost 2 passes a game, 27 receptions, 38 targets, almost 200 yards and a touchdown. So 13 total touchdowns for Nick Chubb. This offensive line was atrocious last year, and he still dominated. What did he end up with for rushing yards? If we look quick. So 298 rushing attempts, almost 1,500 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns, 5 yards per carry, and their offensive line was garbage. They drafted a tackle in the 1st round, and they didn't trade for him, but they signed in free agency Jack Conklin from Tennessee. So, I mean, they got 2 new bookends on the offensive line, and they have offensive coordinator from the Vikings last year, Kevin Stefanski, as their head coach. Alex Van Pelt is the offensive coordinator, and this is going to be a very run-heavy team. It's basically going to look like Minnesota's offense last year. That's how I think it'll go. So Kareem Hunt's fine. He's going to be great in PPR leagues, but I really don't think they're going to take Nick Chubb's touches away from him. They're going to find more creative ways to get Kareem Hunt involved in the receiving game and try to keep Nick Chubb healthy at certain areas of the game. But Nick Chubb's going to be a volume workhorse. He's going to probably be that offensive line is going to be better. So I'm expecting big things from Nick Chubb. And like I said, outside of those top 6 guys, he's the first person I look for. I have him projected to lead the league in rushing, and I have him 2nd in rushing touchdowns. So everything about Nick Chubb is fantastic for me. And then number 8 here, I have Josh Jacobs. This might be the first surprise, but I love Josh Jacobs' game. He missed 3 games last year, and I think he was like RB20 or 22 or something like that. But I have him projected for 295 carries, same as Nick Chubb. About 1,400 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns. And then I got him projected for 33 receptions, 40 targets, 275 yards, and a touchdown. His receiving, that's a thing that people are going to argue a lot about with Josh Jacobs, is he's not a PPR back or he doesn't get usage in the passing game. But I just read some interesting stuff. I don't know who was talking about it. I'll see if I can find it real quick. But as far as the passing game, I don't know why the Raiders didn't use him in the passing game last year. He only caught, I think it was like 27 balls. But here's a blurb that I found. I can't remember who was talking about it, but I guess it looks like Scott Barrett was talking to somebody, and this is from Vic Tafur. I think he's like an Oakland beat writer. Let's see here. So he covers the Raiders in the NFL for The Athletic, and here's the tweet. So here's the story. I heard that Gruden was so mad last year that Jacobs didn't win Offensive Rookie of the Year, 3rd best rookie, Kyler Murray did because he's a quarterback, that he vowed that Jacobs would get more carries and more receptions to prove what a crime the voters had committed. So Gruden's kind of that dude where if something's bothering him, he's going to make sure he corrects it, and he's going to be kind of hard-headed with it. So Josh Jacobs, coming into the draft, he was he was one of the best receiving backs in the league. So it kind of blew my mind that he wasn't used as a receiver as much last year. But we see Jacobs down here last year, RB21 in full PPR, almost 15 points per game. And again, only 20 receptions on 27 targets. So, I mean, he had a few games where he just didn't catch a ball. But for the most part, it looked like he had 2 or 3 targets every game. So I think I'm going to, if he times 3 times 16, that's 48 targets. And I think that could be something that we see. The thing about the depth chart on the Raiders is they have Jalen Richard there, who's their primary 2-minute offensive, pass catching back. But they did let go of DeAndre Washington, who's now in the Chiefs. And DeAndre Washington, I think he leaves like 40 or 44 targets from last year. Let me double check that. So Las Vegas. So last year, DeAndre Washington had 41 targets. So those are all up for grabs. I know they added Lynn Bowden in the draft, but again, he's a rookie, and he's a rookie receiver for the most part. So I really don't know how much John Gruden's going to trust him right away to handle 40-some targets. So I have a feeling that this number 41 here, we're going to see some of that siphon to Josh Jacobs. Maybe some of it goes to Richard. Maybe some of it goes to Devontae Booker. But I feel really confident in saying Josh Jacobs, his 20 receptions and 27 targets from last year, that's probably going to be an outlier in his career going forward. That's one of the best parts of his game if you go back and watch his college tape. So I'm expecting an increase in target share. Even then, I only increased it. He had 5.16 target share last year. I increased it to 7.41. And I think this is his floor this year. I think he's catching more than I want to increase it, but I'm trying to hold myself back from being all excited about it. But Josh Jacobs, especially if I get pick 11, 12, even 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range, I love if Nick Chubb falls to me, it's like, hell yeah. And then on the turn, I look for Josh Jacobs because those dudes are going to get the ball. Like I said here, you're almost getting 600 carries, and you have the potential to get 3,000 yards, especially with the receiving totals. You're going to get over 3,000 yards from those two backs, and you're going to get a lot of touchdowns. So Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs are 2 of my favorite values outside of the top 5. And then after Josh Jacobs, we got Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones scored a ton of touchdowns last year. So it's pretty easy to predict him to come down in overall touchdowns. He had 16 on the ground, 3 in the air. So 19 total touchdowns. I have him down for 9 rushing, 3 receiving, so 12. So that's a good, decrease there. But I still have him as an RB1. So he had 236 carries last year. I have him at 225. 1,084 rushing yards last year. I have him at 1,075. I have him being a little bit more efficient. I have his yards per carry up a little bit, 4.8 to 4.6 last year. And again, the touchdowns are massively down. But I kept him the same usage as a receiver pretty much. So I don't really see his role changing. They did add A.J. Dillon, who I think might take some red zone touchdowns away. I have A.J. Dillon with 5 touchdowns. And the thing I'm thinking about is last year, LaFleur proved that he wanted to run the ball in the red zone. Maybe defenses are going to be watching for that a little bit more. So I kind of threw some of those rushing touchdowns last year to Aaron Rodgers' side in the passing game. But Aaron Jones is still a great player. Anytime he gets the ball, he can take one to the house, and especially as a receiver too. So we'll see if they can ramp up his receiver workload as they still don't really have a tested depth chart at receiver. So he's going to be heavily used there. He's still going to get some touchdowns, and I don't know. A lot of people are calling him a bust, but if you can get him in the second round, he's got RB1 upside for most weeks. He plays Minnesota Vikings twice a year. Their defense, I don't really know what's going on with that defense this year. Lions defense won't be very good either, and the Bears, they're still a top 5 caliber defense, but those are some really friendly games for Aaron Jones, and I don't know. I'm not afraid to take Aaron Jones in the second round. Especially if you can get him as your RB2. I think that's where he looks really, really good. And a lot of these guys you can have. Basically, sometimes I see like Miles Sanders and Joe Mixon go round 1, but you can legit get most of these guys as your RB2, and that's when things start to look really nice. So if you can land one of these studs here at the top and pair, whether it's Derrick Henry and like Austin Ekeler to combat, the rushing and the receiving upside of players, maybe that's an idea. But sitting here at RB10 is Austin Ekeler. And I'm sure everyone's seen the photo of Austin Ekeler lately. The dude posted a little workout photo of himself. And he just looks like a tank. Like his neck muscles have muscles. Like just look at this guy. So he looks like he's ready to carry a good amount of a career high of carries this year. So I have him at 165 carries, 705 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns. But you're drafting Austin Ekeler for his receiving upside. So 74 receptions, 101 targets, 675 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So 9 total touchdowns. He's going to be second in target share for my running backs, up here at 18.36%. And Ekeler, as long as you're playing PPR, that's where Eckler's going to shine. So he's up here at RB10. If you're in half PPR, he kind of falls a little bit. Let's see here. The RB14. And in standard, you're probably just not even going to consider Austin Ekeler, but he's still RB17. So that's kind of his range. I think he could be a top 10 running back, and he could be an RB 17. It really depends on how that offense is going to work with Tyrod Taylor. And if they stick with Taylor or Justin Herbert, I've kind of just been avoiding the Chargers in general. And I haven't really been getting a lot of shares of Austin Ekeler because that's where I like to take my Josh Jacobs, my Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon. I think there's just a few too many better options, and there's more clarity with those players than Austin Ekeler. So I love Austin Ekeler, but you have to understand, it's kind of like the thing we talked about with Aaron Jones in the touchdown regression. If we look at what Austin Ekeler did with Phillip Rivers last year, I mean, the man, he ran for 3 touchdowns and he caught 8. He's not catching 8 touchdowns this year. So he did score 11 total. I have him down here at 9. And I feel like that's being generous. That's because I gave him 5 rushing touchdowns, 4 receiving. So 9 total. We'll see if he can kind of hang around that spot. But I love watching Austin Ekeler. I just don't know about the Chargers this year. So I got him at RB10 though. And then RB11 here, we're sitting with Clyde EdwardsHelaire. Of course, I made the video. If you haven't watched that, you can check that out in a second. But Damian Williams opted out for 2020. So I did a live video talking about that. And then I did my live projections for Clyde EdwardsHelaire. And he came out to RB10 in the video, but I made some tweaks. And I think Austin Ekeler hopped him for a second. But 230 rushing attempts, 1,060 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, 48 receptions, 375 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. So Austin Ekeler, but Clyde EdwardsHelaire, he's clocking in as an RB1. He's got a crazy range of outcomes. You either love him or you just don't want to trust a rookie. But if you can get him in the round 2, I think that's the spot where he's going to look really good as your RB2. So maybe that's as high as the 13th overall pick. I did a mock draft, which I'll probably link in one of the videos at the end. But I did a mock draft where I took him as high as 7th just to see what would happen if someone was crazy enough to do that. And the team didn't look terrible. So he's got RB1 upside. But again, I think he looks best as an RB2. He's not going to be a traditional banger kind of running back. He's going to be kind of like that Austin Ekeler mold. But he's got, as soon as the Chiefs get to the red zone, man, it's going to be fun to watch to see what they do with him and try and score in different ways. But I wanted to say, because I was talking about DeAndre Washington earlier, I have him as the RB2 in Kansas City right now. So I have on, this feels like a number that I'm pretty low on with DeAndre Washington. So I might even lower my expectations for Clyde Edwards a little bit. And if I'm going to invest in the Chiefs, I'm just going to want Pat Mahomes. I'm going to want Tyreek Hill. I'm going to want Travis Kelce. But their running back score, man. But again, rookies make me a little nervous. And Andy Reid has been, he's shown the last few years that he likes to kind of mix and match running backs and have them do things differently based on what they do well. So DeAndre Washington, he's a solid, sound running back. He could be a better goal line option if they want to go bigger there. But yeah, the RB2 spot's up for grabs, and so we'll see how much of a workload goes there. But Clyde EdwardsHelaire right now clocking in as my RB11. RB12, we got Miles Sanders. And this is why I'm talking about kind of editing Clyde Edwards' numbers a little bit. I kind of think if I'm in the heat of the moment, I'm probably taking Miles Sanders over Edwards, over Ekeler. It's a toss-up between him and Jones just because I like the Packers' structure of offense a little bit better. And then, so Miles Sanders, I have him as my RB12. I think this is his floor. We just saw a news blurb about Miles Sanders. I think it was Friday. It might have been Friday. Today's Sunday. But it was Deuce Staley. He was talking about, he says, Deuce Staley is excited about Miles Sanders handling a full workload. He thinks the Eagles don't need to monitor his touches, and you can put him in and just let him go. So that's a really positive sign. Not only did they did not add, the traditional big back that Doug Peterson has liked to have in his offenses, But now you got the running backs coach saying that. So it makes me super excited for Miles Sanders. I think it really depends on the touchdowns, but he's got top 5 upside, as a second-round pick. So I have him going for 217 rushing attempts, almost 1,000 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, about 55 receptions, 525 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns there. So these are numbers, and what's crazy here is I've been kind of planning for them to sign a running back. So I have more. If they don't sign a running back, I have the numbers that I have highlighted here. I have those to kind of dole back out, to Boston Scott, Miles Sanders, maybe even Corey Clement. So I'm probably going to be boosting Sanders' numbers over the week this week. So you can expect him, I guess if I'm being honest, he'll be my RB10. I'm going to have him above EdwardsHelaire, Austin Ekeler, but he's going to probably slot in right behind Aaron Jones. So I love Miles Sanders. I love the opportunity. He's a pass catcher, so PPR, he's got he's full go there. So that's my top 12. Those are my RB1s. And if you really look at it, we kind of talked about the top 6. I'm gonna call it Nick Chubb as the top 7. To me, that's the clear top 7. I have a hard time seeing anyone really finish above those guys. And then we got this group here, and I'm gonna go all the way to Melvin Gordon. But from RB8 to RB16, I think all these guys are equally, the same. So I have Josh Jacobs at 272 fantasy points, and then this comes down to, I guess we'll uninclude Melvin Gordon, and we'll just go to Kenyon Drake here. But 272 points to 260, that's 12 points that separate RB8 from RB14. So all of these guys are in this tight little window of potential RB1s, but these guys all look awesome as your RB2. So if you can get, one of these top 7 backs and pair them with one of the ones that I have highlighted here, I think you're going to have a good time, to say the least. And then we'll just target our receivers later. But I highly recommend thinking about that strategy. So we got Joe Mixon here and Kenyon Drake. Those are the last 2 guys that I think have, legit. I want to include James Conner and Melvin Gordon in this list, but just for the numbers' sake here, I got Joe Mixon at RB13. He was RB13 last year. And on a points per game basis, I actually have him playing better than he did last year. But when I do my projections, I kind of project for a ceiling. And it's the Bengals offense. I really don't know how many games they're going to win this year. Is he even going to get, I have him for 278 rushing attempts, or that's what he got last year, 1,137 yards, 5 touchdowns, 45 targets, 35 receptions, almost 300 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. So if you look at the numbers this year, I gave him a little boost in rushing attempts. I gave him more rushing yards. I gave him more touchdowns. I gave him more receiving numbers. So I'm like, he's RB13, but I'm projecting him to have a better season than last year. So I'm not going to argue with him. I might even take Joe Mixon over Austin Ekeler and Clyde EdwardsHelaire. So I think that might be the shakeup. Those guys might fall just a little bit down. Mixon's going to probably float into the top 12. And he's going to have a good opportunity share. He's going to get touches. He's going to get receptions. He comes in as my RB9 in opportunity share. So that's a really good number there. He's going to get the ball. And it's just really the offense. The defense is not going to be good. The team's not going to be good. You got a rookie quarterback, year 2 of an offensive coordinator, and year 2 of a rookie, I guess a young head coach. We'll see what they can do. But I think they're going to be throwing the ball a lot more than people expect. But I got Joe Mixon going for 10 touchdowns this year and maybe about 1,600 total yards. So I like Joe Mixon's game. We'll see how the Bengals can operate with Joe Burrow. But that's kind of where I stand there. And then I got Kenyon Drake here at 260 points. I have him as my RB14, but it's not going to surprise me if he's a top 10 running back this year. And I need to update these, but I think I would take him over Ekeler, over Clyde EdwardsHelaire, just because I think Kenyon Drake's going to get a lot of touches this year. You think about how you're going to guard the Arizona Cardinals, you're going to first think about Kyler Murray. How do we keep him contained? Then you got to worry about DeAndre Hopkins, and then maybe it's Kenyon Drake you have to worry about. But then they're going to gash you with Fitzgerald or Kirk. So there's a lot of moving parts of that offense, and he's not really the primary focus. You're worried about Murray, and you're worried about D. Hopkins, torching you. So I have Kenyon Drake going for 217 attempts, almost 1,100 yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, 46 receptions, 330 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I have him getting a lot of touchdowns in that offense. I think they're going to be very efficient. And like I said, he's not really the primary focus. When you think about how you're going to stop the Cardinals, it's all about Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, and then everything else is just kind of what happens. So I like Kenyon Drake there. He looked great as an RB2. My next best, these are probably two of my favorite sleeping running backs next, because basically all the guys up here, you have to take within the first 2 rounds. And I do not see James Conner or Melvin Gordon going until mid to late 3rd. And James Conner goes even later. Sometimes he goes in the 4th round. And I think both of these guys have top 12 upside, top 10 upside even. It really depends on if James Conner can stay healthy. But basically, I'm going to lump these two together. They both need to stay healthy, and they're both going to be used in the passing game. The Broncos, they got Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. So Melvin Gordon's going to walk right into the receiving back role there, and he's going to get all the goal line touches. I don't think they're going to use Phillip Lindsay much at the goal line. They're going to kind of let him be in between the 20s kind of guy to keep Gordon fresh. But they paid Melvin Gordon to be there. The defense is still not – the secondary is going to be bad, so they might be letting up a lot of touchdowns. So I think Gordon's going to be on the field getting a lot of receiving work with Drew Lock. So I love Melvin Gordon in the 3rd round if you can get him there. He's going to be an RB2 for me in most places, but he's going to have RB1 upside most weeks. And then James Conner, the whole Pittsburgh offense is being undervalued right now just because it has the stink of what happened last year. Can Ben Roethlisberger stay healthy and play a full 16? Can Juju stay healthy? Can Conner stay healthy? There's a lot of moving parts there with the main pieces. But for a 4th round pick, if James Conner and all those guys can keep it together, even like Conner even succeeded without Ben Roethlisberger, without Juju last year. So I feel of all those players, I feel the best about James Conner. Again, he just needs to stay healthy. But I do have Conner projected over 1,000 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Both of these guys, Conner and Gordon, are fantastic receiving backs. So they get the boost in PPR. And then I guess if I'm going to talk about those guys, I kind of have to talk about Le'Veon Bell because I only have him, a half point behind Melvin Gordon. And the thing about the Jets is their defense is going to be bad. C.J. Mosley just opted out for the season. They lost their best safety, Jamal Adams, to Seattle. So they're going to be bad. I don't expect them to run the ball a lot, but they're going to be throwing the ball a little bit more. So I might have to revise my Sam Darnold projections. But Le'Veon Bell, the thing about last year that I really liked about Le'Veon Bell is he got a ton of targets, his opportunity share was very high. So if I go ahead here and filter by opportunity share, and again, if you're new to opportunity share, that is the total amount of rushing attempts and the total amount of targets a player gets divided by the total amount of touches a team has. And Le'Veon Bell clocks in at RB7. So he's going to get plenty of opportunity to get the ball, to get receptions. He's not going to be a goal line. Like they don't really like to run the ball on the goal line. But if you go to thefantasyfellowship.com, I do have an opportunity report here, 2019 opportunity report, and it's going to show you where everyone finished in this number opportunity share last year. And we see Le'Veon Bell was up here at 5th best opportunity, RB16. But there's a very strong correlation as to where how high their opportunity share is and how well these players finish in PPR rankings. So the higher the opportunity share, the more likely they are to be a top 10 running back or a top 12 running back. So it's not a sexy pick, but Le'Veon Bell's got potential to do some things. So I'm kind of into him at that point. And where did he go? Something just happened here. There we go. So Le'Veon Bell clocks in RB17. RB18 is Chris Carson. He's nursing a hip injury, but he looks good to go. Rashad Penny's hurt. So I think Chris Carson's going to be in for a big workhorse season again. They did add Carlos Hyde, but I think he's just going to be a kind of change of pace guy. And they do use Chris Carson as their primary receiving back. You see, last year he had 47 targets. The next closest back had 13. So Carson, he's a poor man's Melvin Gordon, I think. And he looks great. If you can get, the thing is, you can get Carson as your RB3. He's a round 4 pick usually. Sometimes he creeps to the end of round 4, and that's kind of where I like his value. He was RB12 last year in just 15 games, averaging 16 points per game. So if that offense wants to run the ball, when they get near the red zone, they're going to run the ball. Again, he had 7 touchdowns last year on the ground, 2 receiving, and he was their best receiving back. So I do have him kind of projected lower for rushing attempts this year because of Carlos Hyde. We'll see if Rashad Penny can get on the field. We'll see if they want to use this rookie DJ Dallas. But he still clocks in as my RB18, so that's pretty good. So Carson, I sign off on him as RB2, RB3. He looks better, but then we go to Leonard Fournette, my RB19. And the thing about Leonard Fournette you got to draft. It's kind of like drafting Le'Veon Bell. It's like, oh man, you got to watch the Jets and the Jaguars this year. The Jaguars are not going to be good. They're going to have one of the worst defenses in the league. And Leonard Fournette's coming off a season where he caught a lot of passes. RB7 last year, he had 100 targets, 76 receptions, 522 yards. Now, the thing about the Jaguars this year is they brought in Jay Gruden from Washington. And let me see where my Jacksonville Jaguars numbers are here. But they also brought in Chris Thompson, he's the PPR third down scat back. So I have Leonard Fournette's numbers coming down as far as targets and receptions. They're not going to score a lot of touchdowns this year, so I gave him 5 total touchdowns. We'll see if he gets there, but he only had 3 last year, so I guess I feel good about him getting at least more than 3 this year. But the team's not going to be good. The offensive line is still a work in progress, but he's going to get the volume. He's going to get almost 250 carries. He's going to get about 70 targets, and we'll see what he can do with them. But his ADP is about the price of a third-round pick, and if I'm going to take a running back in the third round, give me Melvin Gordon. I'll wait for James Conner. I'm totally okay with that. So that's kind of how I view Leonard Fournette. He would have to fall a little bit for me to draft him. But I get it if you want him. He's a dependable RB2, and he could be used in the passing game, so he could have a decent floor, 10 points a week. But I'm just not really into drafting a Jaguars running back. And then we got Todd Gurley down here at RB20. Now, Todd Gurley is a big injury risk with his knees, but he's in Atlanta. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for him to catch passes. He's going to get a lot of opportunities in the goal line, in the red zone. But I only have him projected for 195 carries, about almost 900 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns, and about 46 receptions. So the thing about Atlanta is I don't expect Atlanta to be good this year either. I don't think they're gonna be much different than what they've been the last few years. They're gonna throw the ball a ton, and they're gonna try to run the ball in the red zone when they can, but they also got, guys like Quadri Allison, Ito Smith, Brian Hill. They're going to try to work those guys in to keep Todd Gurley healthy. And Todd Gurley he's kind of like Leonard Fournette. He's one of those guys that has like a round 3 ADP price tag. Sometimes he goes in the late second, but I haven't been touching Todd Gurley at ADP because of the knee injury concerns. But I guess if he were to fall to round 3, even then I'm still looking for a guy like Adam Thielen or someone else. So I kind of pivoted away from Todd Gurley, but I get it if you're into him. And he's one of those guys where if he plays the full 16-game season, Todd Gurley's going to score touchdowns. He's going to be used as a pass catcher, and he could blow up my ADP, my projections here. But I'm kind of limiting my expectations. He's my RB20. And then my RB21, Ronald Jones. The Bucs just signed LaShawn McCoy. They placed rookie Keyshawn Vaughn on the COVID IR spot. So we'll see when Vaughn can get back in the mix. But LaShawn McCoy, a lot of people are nervous about the Bucs. They were nervous about the Bucs backfield already. Now that McCoy's there, they're just like, we can't touch this. But one sec. But the thing about LaShawn McCoy is he was being a healthy scratch last year on the Chiefs. They weren't even using him in the playoffs. They weren't even using him in the Super Bowl. And that's to me, that's a little weird. We see LaShawn McCoy played 13 regular season games, but his last game was week 15, and he was a healthy scratch week 16, 17, 2 playoff games in the Super Bowl. They don't even call him up in the Super Bowl. So I really don't know how much left he has in the tank. He did average 4.6 yards per rush. He was fine as a receiver, but his numbers were kind of low, only 6.5 yards per reception. But again, you think about Bruce Arians, he just wants a dependable back there that he can trust if things go wrong. But I think because they signed a guy like LaShawn McCoy and not a Devonta Freeman, to me this leans towards them being very comfortable with Ronald Jones being the first and second down running back. So I'm kind of thinking about this Bucs backfield like the Patriots back of the past, where Ronald Jones is going to be their Sony Michel, where they get near, they're going to run him as close as they can get to the end zone and see what happens. And then they're going to use a committee of LaShawn McCoy, Keyshawn Vaughn, Daryl Gunbowale to change out the third down role and kind of just keep defenses guessing. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. So I view Ronald Jones as a Sony Michel type, who's still going to catch. Jones is a better pass catcher than Sony Michel, so he's still going to catch. Last year he caught 31 receptions, 40 targets, 309 yards for a 10 yards per catch average, which is fantastic for a running back. So he's still going to catch balls on first and second down. And I even feel like these numbers are kind of low. He had 172 rushing attempts last year, 4.2 yards per carry. And so I only gave him a boost of about 30 carries with Peyton Barber out of the mix. And I'm kind of viewing last year's Peyton Barber numbers of his 154 rushing attempts. I see that kind of going between Vaughn and McCoy. So it's going to be kind of like what it was last year, but I think they're just going to lean a little bit more into Ronald Jones being their primary first and second down back. So he clocks in at RB21, and it's an offense, man, that's going to be humming. They're going to get near the red zone. You got to worry about Evans, Gronk, and Godwin. Like, holy crap, Ronald Jones might have a lot of free running room. So I like him, and he's a guy that, I only have him projected for 9 touchdowns, and we've seen what Patriots backs have done before. So he has a chance to really impress and maybe finish as a top 16 back. So I love Ronald Jones in this. He's going in the 6th round now. I loved him getting him in the 7th and 8th and 9th round a couple weeks ago, but that seems like everyone's kind of coming in the idea of Ronald Jones being good. So RB22, Tarik Cohen. I got Tarik Cohen as higher than David Montgomery. 78 receptions, 101 yards, 550 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. On the ground, just 75 carries, 325 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns there. But last year, this Bears offense was not good. The thing that I found interesting was Tarik Cohen even admitted that they kind of overcomplicated things last year, and he didn't really take care of his body, so he's kind of rededicating himself. But the man saw almost an 18% target share last year, and I've even got him lower this year. He is at 17.93 last year. I have him at 17.12. But the thing about Tarik Cohen last year is he only scored 3 touchdowns, and his averages were really low. So 3.3 yards per run, 5.8 yards per catch. In prior years, up here at 4.5 yards per carry, 10.2 yards per catch. Even the year before that, 4.3 yards per carry, 6.7 yards per catch. So I have him, being more efficient, being a little bit more effective, on the ground and in the air, scoring a couple more touchdowns. And last year he was still a really good running back. He was RB27, so that's his floor. And I don't really have him much higher than that. But RB21, he's going sometimes in the 8th round. So if you're in a PPR league, especially a best ball league where you don't know when to start him, he's a great pick as your 3rd running back, a guy that could just pop in every other week for your best ball lineup. Or he could be a guy that you can just leave in your flex spot because, even his bad weeks, if we look at some of his bad weeks, Tarik Cohen, PPR, some of his bad weeks are frustrating. These 4.5s, these 4.4s, a 3.6. But if you look at all of his games as a whole, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 games over double digits last year. That's half of the games. And then he had a couple nines here. So 10 of the 16 games he was very usable, and he didn't have a good year. So I expect him to be better. Maybe he has 10 games of double digits with 13 usable games. So he might be a guy that you can just leave in as your flex in PPR leagues. So I love Tarik Cohen. RB23, I have David Johnson. We'll see if David Johnson has anything left in the tank, but the way they used the running backs last year, they gave Carlos Hyde a ton of work, especially near the goal line, and they let him just keep pounding. That's kind of how I view David Johnson right now, is he's going to be Carlos Hyde. They're going to probably throw to him a little bit more than they did Carlos Hyde, which is why I have him a little bit higher. But if we look at what Carlos Hyde finished last year, Carlos Hyde was RB28, about 245 carries, only 16 targets, 10 receptions. So that's the difference. You can basically pencil in these rushing stats for David Johnson and then just boost up the receiving numbers a little bit, and that's where you get David Johnson at RB23. The rookie that I'm probably most excited to draft is Cam Akers because he costs the least. Compared to Jonathan Taylor or Clyde EdwardsHelaire, you're paying up for those guys. Whereas Cam Akers is sometimes like a 6th or 7th round pick, and he's going to be the leading back for the Rams. He's the best pass catching back right away. I have a hard time seeing, Darrell Henderson beating him, Malcolm Brown maybe in the goal line work. But Cam Akers just offers a lot more. He reminds me of a young Dalvin Cook, and we'll see if he can get loose. The offensive line's not great, but I have a feeling that once we see a couple games of Cam Akers, they're going to be like, how do we get this guy the ball more? So he's my RB24. Those are my RB2s. And then I guess we're going to kind of just quickly go over We're getting to the end of the video here. I don't know what the time is, but we're probably going on the longer side. But yeah, these are all my RB3s. These are guys that I think are great to have as your flex, your the first running back on your bench, guys that have upside. If there's an injury, they're going to be on the chutes and ladders up. So that's going to be Raheem Mostert. He's not as much involved in the passing game, but he just signed he restructured his deal with the 49ers. Tevin Coleman's there. They do not have Matt Breida anymore. So maybe the numbers get a little bit boosted for Raheem and Tevin Coleman. And then I do have Tevin Coleman down here at RB32. So I have him being a valuable running back. But these guys, to me, are more best ball picks. I don't know if we can trust them on a weekly basis. But Raheem Mostert's a great runner. He's a very good runner, one of the best. If you just ask him to run the ball and not worry about passing stats, he's going to be one of the better running backs in the league. And it's a good offense, great defense. That's what they want to do. They want to run the ball. RB26 is David Montgomery. I'm not a David Montgomery believer for the most part. I don't really trust the Bears' offense. Offensive line's not good. And David Montgomery's kind of a plodder. He's not going to create yards, after contact, but he's going to take contact. So he's got a chance at, I have him at 8 touchdowns. I think he scored 6 or 7 last year. So I have him a little bit better than last year. But I mean, if you own David Montgomery, you know what I'm talking about. If you left him out as your RB2 every week, there was, more often than not, he was disappointing you. So I have him basically he's a high-end RB3 for me. I'm not going to feel comfortable with him in my lineup every week. He's more of a best ball pick for me. I would rather have the next guy on the list, Kareem Hunt, who I know is going to be useful in the passing game. He's going to get me about 10 points a week. I have Kareem Hunt at 110 carries, 475 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. And then the big one is 53 receptions, 400 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. So that Browns offense is going to be very run-centric. Nick Chubb's going to eat a lot, but there's going to be some leftovers for Kareem Hunt on the ground, and there's going to be more than enough for him in the passing game. So I love getting Kareem Hunt as my RB3. I think he could be an RB2 this year for most weeks. And then I'm low on Jonathan Taylor just because Marlon Mack's going to be there. Naheem Hines is going to take away passing work. I don't see Jonathan Taylor being very used, in the passing game. So I think Taylor's going to be a great runner. If they get near the goal line, I don't know if they're going to give that to Marlon Mack or Taylor, but Taylor's going to have a lot of running room. It's a great offensive line. Phillip Rivers, they're going to be able to manage the game and keep the running game on schedule. But I have a hard time just because he's not going to be used as a pass catcher like Clyde EdwardsHelaire is, like Cam Akers is. I'm a little bit nervous about that. So I just have him as an RB3. I think it's going to take an injury for Mack or Hines or something for Taylor to get boosted up a little bit. And then I got Devin Singletary at RB29. When I do my RBs to avoid video, Devin Singletary is going to be probably the number 1 running back to avoid. I'm nervous about Zach Moss coming in and just being better than Devin Singletary. I know Singletary had a nice second half of the year last year as a rookie, but Devin Singletary is walking in to the Frank Gore role. He's going to be the guy that they put in near the goal line and getting the rushing touchdowns. I don't see a lot of rushing touchdowns for Devin Singletary. And I think Zach Moss might be the better run blocker. He might even be the better pass catcher in yards after catch. He might just be a little bit more well-rounded than Devin Singletary. So I do have Zach Moss sitting here at RB35, whereas, Devin Singletary sometimes costs a round 4 or round 5 pick, whereas you can get Zach Moss for free in the double-digit round. So I'd rather use my round 4 or 5 pick on some upside receivers or some, James Conner or a running back's falling like that. So I'm avoiding Devin Singletary completely. He's my RB29. And then I have the Baltimore Ravens running backs. So I think this is probably going to wrap up the video. If you want to check out my RB rankings, I do have those up on the fantasyfellowship.com if you want to see the rest. But this video is getting a little long. So I do have all the rankings here, and I do have them. If you just click on RB, it'll go to PPR, and then you can click whatever you need. But all these rankings are here. You can check those out. But we're going to end it with this. The Baltimore Ravens. Mark Ingram was RB11 last year. He had a lot of rushing touchdowns. He caught a lot of touchdowns last year. But they just spent a second-round pick on who I thought the best running back was in the draft, J.K. Dobbins. He was the best all-around running back, the most elite runner and the most elite pass catcher. I know Clyde EdwardsHelaire is probably the better pass catcher, but I love what Dobbins brings to the table as a traditional running back. And I just think that as the season goes on, this Baltimore Ravens backfield reminds me a lot of what the Browns had 2 years ago when they had Carlos Hyde as the incumbent and they drafted Nick Chubb. So Mark Ingram is Carlos Hyde and J.K. Dobbins he's Nick Chubb. He's not, as big and like bruising as Nick Chubb, but the talent level is off the charts with J.K. Dobbins. And I have a feeling that once we see him for a couple games, it could be 2 weeks in and Dobbins is, blasted off a 45-yard touchdown run in like both games. And then John Harbaugh is looking at his offensive coordinator saying, we got to get this guy the ball more. And Mark Ingram kind of becomes the backup. He's 32 years old, I think, too. Maybe he's 31, but Mark Ingram's getting up there. I think they're going to try to eventually start feeding J.K. Dobbins down the stretch. And as far as draft capital, Dobbins costs maybe an 8th-round pick, 7th-round pick at the most. Whereas Ingram's kind of in the same neighborhood, but I just think J.K. Dobbins, once we see him on the field compared to Mark Ingram, he's going to offer a lot more. He's going to stick out on tape. He's just going to offer more juice. So J.K. Dobbins is probably my favorite running back at that point in the draft. And I just think come November, I know Mark Ingram's a really good running back, but as the season goes on, I just think J.K. Dobbins is going to continue to impress us and show us that he needs the ball more. And you have Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins in the same backfield. That's not even fair. So I'm really high on Dobbins, and I think that's going to finish up the rest of this RB video. You can go ahead and check out my rankings, like I said, on thefantasyfellowship.com. But again, this is a working document. You can access my document on Patreon. There's a link below in the video if you want to get access to my rankings, my projections. I do have all my team tabs where you can be filtering, this is Seattle, Tampa Bay. I have everything projected here. And what's cool is as I project these, it's going to be live updated. So you don't have to wait for my updates on my website. You can actually just go right to the feed, get the numbers, and take these to your draft with you. And I'm going to be working on a draft cheat sheet. I'll probably start posting that maybe end of next week. I don't really know how early people draft, but I always draft on Labor Day, so I'm going to get those cranking out soon. But yeah, the rankings are all ready to go. And if you're listening on any of the podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, whatever, leave a rating, leave a review, whatever you can do to help grow the Fantasy Fellowship, Fellow KGB channel. And if you're on YouTube and you like the content, don't forget to leave me a comment. Tell me who your favorite running back is. Tell me a running back that I'm too low on. Tell me who you agree on. If you agree with me on Josh Jacobs being used more as a pass catcher, or if I'm too low on Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, any of these guys, tell me your thoughts. I'd love to have a conversation in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. And thank you for your time. I'm really blessed to see the channel start to grow. I started in June. We got some good numbers going. And I'm just very appreciative of all the volume of numbers that I'm seeing. So thank you again, and we'll see you in another video. Peace.